Okay, so now we get to the really fun part of translating. So we've got our first draft. It's here. My first draft is here, the one that began at the end of the battle and dead the combatant. And now we've got my second draft. I'm going to read you the first two stanzas just so that we can hear the difference first of all, and then we'll talk through it. The masses. When the battle was done and the fighter was dead, a man went up to him and said, "Don't die, I love you so." But the corpse, oh, he went on dying. Two more approached and said to him again, "Don't leave us, be brave, come back to life." But the corpse, oh, he went on dying. So now you can start to hear that it sounds a little bit more natural, at least to my ear it sounds more natural. So at first we had this at the end of the battle and dead the combatant. Something in the syntax there is wrong, isn't it? And that often happens when we translate literally. So in our first draft, we'll often get words coming up in the wrong order, and that's because different languages have different structures and different ways of organising their verbs and their nouns and their adjectives. So often things can read really gobbledygook. So what our job is as translators is to sort the order of the words and all of the different kinds of words and the structure of the sentence back into flowing English. So when the battle was done and the fighter was dead has come out of at the end of the battle and dead the combatant. Now, at the end of the battle was a bit closer to the original, al fin de la batalla, at the end of the battle. But when the battle was done, I've changed the order of that sentence, and that was in order to get some repetition in order for the rhythm of the poem to really start to flow. So when the battle was done and the fighter was dead. So we get that repetition of was, the verb was. So that's a very quick idea of how to start translating and start playing around with different ways and different orders of words. That's absolutely fine. That's what we want you to do as translators of poetry. Next, I want to talk about the passionate speech, and this ties into punctuation. If we don't punctuate properly, for example, if I'd forgotten to take out the speech marks, to include the speech marks, or if I'd forgotten to include those exclamation marks, or if I'd chosen to take them out, everything would sound different. So if I took away the exclamation mark, "Don't die, I love you so," it would sound suddenly flat. So be really careful not to lose any punctuation when you're translating your poem, unless you have a good reason for doing so. Here as well, I want to look at this line, the structure. So the repeated line that we have, but the corpse, oh, he went on dying, but the corpse, oh, he went on dying, that's the red here. So I've made sure that this is exactly the same in every single line, and that's because it's exactly the same in all of the Spanish. So, pero el cadáver, ay, siguió muriendo. So I have changed cadaver, which is the very literal translation of the Spanish word cadáver. I've changed that to corpse. Now, why? Because cadaver obviously sounds closer to the Spanish, but what happens if we use the word cadaver? Suddenly, we're translating the poem, or we're transposing the poem to another time, because I don't know about you, but I don't remember the last time anyone used the word cadaver speaking to me. So instead we've gone for corpse, which means the same thing, and it therefore has a bit more impact because it's a word that we immediately recognise. And I want it to sound natural. I want someone from 2020 to easily be able to understand this poem. That's the same reason why I've taken out alas as well. Any more things? So more natural storytelling. I won't look at the end of the poem now because we'll just focus on the top two. Another thing that I want to tell you about now is rhymezone and thesaurus.com. So the best way, if a word doesn't sound right to you, so if cadaver doesn't sound right, you go to thesaurus.com or use your physical thesaurus, your book, and you look up the word cadaver, and there it will give you a list of different words. For example, it might tell you corpse, it might tell you dead body, and you go then back to the sentence and you substitute the word cadaver for those words, and you listen to it again, see how it sounds. So, but the dead man, oh, he went on dying. Now that would have been okay, but the dead man. But then later we have lots of talk of men, don't we? We have men, the men stood around him, earth's men, and then we talk about the first man. So it could get a bit confusing if we talk about the dead man, the men, the first man. That's why I stayed with corpse. So that's what you need to do. Use the thesaurus, find different ways of saying the same thing until it gives you a really rich flavour of the poem that you want to bring across to your readers. Here's an example of put a way to look at your first draft and your second draft. I find this really useful. So what you do is you create a table in your writing program, for example Word, and you put the same line there, and that means that you can look across and make sure that you've maintained things that you wanted to maintain or lost things that you wanted to lose. So on line 3 we've got do not die, and I've changed that. I've used a contraction, don't die, I love you so. And that's in order again for it to sound like more common, regular, everyday speech that we'd use today. Last thing I really want to quickly talk to you about is don't forget to focus, put some time and energy into your title. So for example, the title of this Spanish poem is Masa, and it means mass. Mass in English can mean two things, can't it? Or it can be more, but it can mean a group of people, as it's meant to mean in the Spanish. But in English, mass can also mean a church service. On Sunday, I'm going to mass. We don't want it to mean that because masa in Spanish does not mean a church service at all. So it's a homonym in English, which means it can mean several different things, the same word having several different meanings. And we want to make sure that that doesn't come across and create ambiguity in the English title. So for example, I've given some other options. The masses, the men, like a group of people, and this poem is about the men. So you can use your mind and use the words in the thesaurus to start spreading out and thinking of all the different possible meanings that you could have for a title. A title should tell us something about the poem that's coming, and it should have impact. I wouldn't suggest entirely changing the title, but I think it would be absolutely reasonable to change the title of Massa, for example, if you had a good argument to do so, to the people or the men. And next we're going to be talking about the commentary that you have to write to explain to the prize judges how you reached the final poem that you reached.